The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands and millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the 6th day of the 7-day session here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in September 2022. And I'd like to share with you something rather deep, because that's what we've been working to access. A Korean master centuries ago said, "Turn the light inward and trace the radiance down to its source." Turn the light inward and trace the radiance down to its source. And a modern writer, Bill Porter, who's also known as Red Pine, has written a number of books, actually, and done a number of translations, including an excellent one on the teachings of Bodhidharma. But in this one, this is called Zen Baggage, and it's his own account of traveling through China and meeting with Chinese monks who have authentic backgrounds, because originally when Buddhism had to more or less go underground in China, there were still some people that were continuing their deep training. But there were others. The Red government installed fake monks in many of the prominent monasteries. And they would just kind of dress in robes and hang out watching TV. They had no essence about them. They had not realized anything at all in terms of any awakening experience. But Bill, being fluent in Chinese, having gone from Texas to Taiwan, and initially becoming a monk. I don't remember, I think it might have been under Shengyan, but I don't know for sure. And eventually left monkhood and became a radio announcer in Taipei, and also did a lot of translations. And he continues to do translations to this day. He lives now in Port Townsend, Washington, just across the water from Whidbey Island. And some of the Whidbey Island Sangha know him personally, and Chisan as well. Getting a copy of Zen Baggage is worth it. There are some jewels in there. It's also basically a travelogue, but there are some very inspiring things that he writes about. And one of them is a definition of Prajna, the Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. What is Prajna? It's considered to be transcendental wisdom, but here is the definition that he has come up with, and I don't know if it's his own or if it's a translation. I suspect it's a translation because the part defining it is in quotes. Prajna is a word around which Mahayana Buddhism formed in the Kushan Empire of northern India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, just before the beginning of the Christian era. It means, quote, what comes before knowledge. What comes before knowledge. And that is what we are seeking. That is what we are reaching for as we are doing the extended out breath, which requires letting go of other extraneous stuff, ultimately opening us to where we can realize that what becomes before. And refers to our original mind, undefiled by discriminations of what passes for knowledge. Adam and Eve before the apple, religion before religion, the mind before mind. In a word, prajna means wisdom. We know that part. And adding the word paramita distinguishes it as ultimate wisdom, or the perfection of wisdom. It's the cultivation of such wisdom that enables a person to see things as they are, empty of self-existence and inseparable from the mind that conjures them into existence. That's a hard thing for many people to wrap themselves around, that this mind is the very mind that is free and unobstructed, primeval, and yet it's also the mind, the same mind, that conjures up ideas about ourselves, images, the world as we assume it is. This is very important because it's pointing to something. Let's read it again. Prajna is a word around which Mahayana Buddhism formed in the Kushan Empire of Northwest India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan just before the beginning of the Christian era. It means, quote, what comes before knowledge, close quote, and refers to our original mind undefiled by discrimination or what passes for knowledge. Adam and Eve before the apple, religion before religion, the mind before mind. In a word, prajna means wisdom, and adding the word paramita distinguishes it as ultimate wisdom, or the perfection of wisdom. It's the cultivation of such wisdom that enables a person to see things as they are. I'm not sure I would use the word cultivation. It's a cultivation of practice that allows us to open to that wisdom, because that wisdom is there, always. We have to open to it, however, and that is the challenge, because we are very identified with our self-image, with things as we assume they are. Just look at politics and the fights that come out as a result of it. Just look at all the different books, look at all the different news services, and all the different points of view that they have. What's the real story? That's what we're searching for within, but not through politics and not through news, through opening to what is before knowledge, through turning the light inward and tracing the radiance down to its source. This is the source of all religions. And in a minute, I'll share something from the Book of Privy Counseling, which was written in the medieval era by an unknown person, but is profoundly deep. It's Christian, but it is recognizable in what I've been saying so far, this teisho. So here is something from Waking Up to the Dark by Clark Strand. It's a quote: "The problem of the heart of this post-medieval epoch we call modern," and that's in quotes, "is the loss of a personal relationship with life." The loss of a personal relationship with life. That is coming at it from a different angle. It should be life with a capital L, but it wasn't in this quote, or at least that's not how it was typed. But when we can truly live life, we are able to function from that innate prajna, wisdom, without it being skewed by our ideas about what we want, what we think, what we feel like we've got to have, all the rest. And when Jacques Lassarin gave up trying to find what made him, or he thought would make him, happy in Buchenwald, that's when he found it, that prajna wisdom. And his life changed as a result, and our lives will as well. And this is the quote from chapter 12 of the Book of Privy Counseling. But now I want you to understand that although in the beginning I told you to forget everything save the blind awareness of your naked being, I intended all along to lead you eventually to the point where you would forget even this, so as to experience only the being of God. It was with an eye to this ultimate experience that I said in the beginning, God is your being. God is your being. And that God is not outside you. You are the being of God in terms of Christianity, although modern Christianity seems to have, in many circles, gotten away from the deepest understanding of that and separated God from being. But now I want you to understand that although in the beginning I told you to forget everything, save the blind awareness of your naked being, which is still an attachment, that's still not letting everything go. I intended all along to lead you eventually to the point where you would forget even this, so as to experience only the being of God. It was with an eye to this ultimate experience that I said in the beginning, God is your being. And another quote. This is from a Tibetan Buddhist, Rinpoche, Dilgo Khentse Rinpoche. Just again, a little bit slightly different flavor, but pointing to the same thing that we are reaching for through our practice. In order to conquer the high ground of the uncreated nature of mind, we must go to the source and recognize the origin of our thoughts. Turn the light inward and trace the radiance down to its source. That doesn't mean thinking about it. That means what is before the inception of thought. Otherwise, one thought gives rise to a second thought, the second thought to a third, and so on forever. We are constantly assailed by memories of the past and carried away by expectations for the future and lose all awareness of the present. It is our own mind that leads us astray into the cycle of existences. Blind to the mind's true nature, we hold fast to our thoughts. So we work with the extended out breath. And it is a struggle because we are invested in our thoughts. We are invested in our self-image. We are invested in the way we think things are. Hakuin, the great Zen master in the 18th century in Japan, who had his first Kensho experience when he was relatively young, on hearing the sound of the bell. Back in his era, they didn't have much in the way of true masters. There were priests who would do commentaries on sutras, and monks would go to wherever those commentaries were being expressed, and they were often several days long, weeks long, and they would go to the monasteries where the master was teaching on a particular sutra or some other commentary. And there wasn't really anything like Sanzen back then. Somehow a lot of it had gotten lost. In ancient China, there wasn't really a formalized Sanzen either. Monks who had questions would go to the master's room and ask. And there are accounts in the koans of awakening experiences when this happened. There's one koan in which a monk This is monk goes to the master and asks a lot of questions. Clearly, the monk has been really working on the question of who he was. And at a certain point, the master says, well, you've been here for some hours, it's time to leave now. And the monk starts to go out and says, it's dark, meaning I'm not going to be able to find my way back to my lodging. And so the master lights a candle and hands it to the monk. And just as the monk takes it, the master blows the candle out. And it caught the monk by such surprise that he had an awakening experience. We have to leave our assumptions behind, at least momentarily, and that's what happened with that monk. He had assumptions sort of jerked out of his hand when the master blew out the candle, which was totally unexpected. We can reach that place that the Book of Privy Counseling is talking about. We can open to our innate Prajna wisdom through the practice. But as I've said so many times, it takes work. It takes work and it takes faith. It takes determination. And it takes a sense that there really is something we can open to that is extremely valuable and worth opening to. And most people who come to Zen practice have that sense. It's called the Great Doubt, although that's a kind of a funny name for it because I'm not sure what doubt we're engaged in, other than possibly the fact that things aren't the way we think they are. Things aren't the way they seem to be. So if they aren't, then how are they? And then we're willing to look beyond. And that takes time. And that brings us to another quote. One does not discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore for a very long time. And that was a quote by a Nobel-winning author who's long died, Andre Gide. In early years of navigation, and this is why the discovery of the new lands, America and so on, are so significant. Prior to that, mariners didn't dare to sail out of sight of the shore because, for one thing, they assumed that the earth was flat and they'd fall off the other side. They also weren't sure they'd ever get back home. But when somehow, I don't know if it was the astrolabe being invented, but somehow they began to recognize that they could navigate by the stars. And so they began to dare to go beyond the sight of land. And then there was a period of great exploration and all kinds of new lands were discovered in history. We also need to go beyond the sight of land, beyond the familiar. Dare to walk into the anxiety that comes up then as a result, because the familiar is what keeps us trapped in a lot of sometimes very painful situations. We can become free, and we can become free in a way you cannot imagine. It's beyond freedom, because it is built in as well. Who are we really? Turn the light inward and trace the radiance down to its source. Trace it down, and then further down, and then further down, and then further down, until you forget yourself so completely that the source is revealed. And then, of course, we need to bring it to life in our life, to bring the functioning of that source to light in our life. So this is a pretty short teisho, actually, which is fine. There's a lot of deep information to absorb and to use as a sort of an instruction and inspiration to go beyond where you think you can go, to go beyond where it's comfortable, to dare to walk into the anxiety that normally comes up when we are metaphorically out of the sight of land, beyond the customary, beyond the comfortable because it's familiar. Only then will you be able to reach that which you already have and be able to make use of it. So I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.